am Pastor Tom Crawford from Morningside Church, Port St. Lucie, Florida. Welcome to our program called Monumental Moments. We're glad to bring this to you each week so that you can share in the stories of lives of people who have had moments that have changed their lives for eternity. As you watch this program today, perhaps you too will have a moment that will transform you forever. Sit back and watch and let Jesus Christ touch your life. Welcome to Monumental Moments.
Oh, I've got a song for you today. It's a story song. Maybe you can relate to it. I know I can. Oh yeah, here we go. The situation seemed so hopeless there for brother Moses, as God's people all were stranded by the sea. Pharaoh's army coming, death would be for certain, and escape was an impossibility. Well, as the chariots grew closer, Moses faced the water, and he raised his hands above his head to pray. Well, if I had been there watching and had seen old Pharaoh coming, I'd say, Moses, there is something I should say. Well, it seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. The storm that you are facing, the tempest that is raging, is what makes you uniquely qualified. For if the road were easy, your faith would not be needed, and you'd never feel his wonder in your life. It seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. Think about it. You say your burden's heavy, more than you can carry, as the trials of this life have got you down. Sorrow after sorrow has darkened your tomorrow, and you see no way for life to turn around. Well, before you give up hoping, turn that Bible open and see how God always knows just what to do. No matter what the struggle, I know that he is able, so there's something I just gotta say to you. Well, it seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. The storm that you are facing, the tempest that is raging, is what makes you uniquely qualified. For if the road were easy, your faith would not be needed, and you'd never feel his wonder in your life. It seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. Well, it seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. The storm that you are facing, the tempest that is raging, is what makes you uniquely qualified. For if the road were easy, your faith would not be needed, and you'd never feel his wonder in your life. It seems that you would make a perfect candidate for a touch from the mighty hand of God. Hi, my name is Jim Sunderworth. I'm coming to you from Morningside Church right here in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and we're glad you've tuned in. We have another special program for you. Pastor Rick Kendall is with us. He's an author. He's been in this area for 30 years, been a pastor for 40 years. Great experiences, but pastors are human, normal, just like all the rest of us that have had some times in their life where they've had to depend on God, and God's brought them through, and we're going to hear that story today. Rick?
Hey.
Nice to have you here today.
Great to be here.
I can't, you don't look old enough to be in the ministry 40 years.
I started when I was 5.
That's what that's so good. And now you've been in this area, Port St. Lucie, for 30 years.
Yes.
You have a wife named
Liz.
3 children.
Yep, Ricky, Jonathan, and Victoria.
Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me their ages. Would they mind?
Oh, Ricky's 30, Jonathan's 27, and Victoria's 22.
My goodness. So they're pretty well out of the nest.
We have 3 grandbabies.
That's so
One on the
great.
way.
That is so great. Well, you are an author, and you have authored the book called Apprehended. And it's a great book on pursuing your purpose. And we're going to be talking about how that God allowed you to pursue your purpose that you're in now, but it had some bumps, and God brought you through, right?
Yeah, it had some big bumps.
That's okay.
You know, I think that we tend sometimes people tend to feel that once they become born again, that everything will be fine. Perfect. And it ain't that way.
Well, because we have to be changed, and as we're changed through our experiences
Yeah.
of trust, greater degrees of trust.
Yes, absolutely.
And sometimes it brings in greater degrees of trials.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you know, this program, I understand, is called Monumental Moments.
Absolutely.
I almost feel like I ought to interview you and yours. My goodness, you've had some major ones. But really, monumental moments are really the word transition.
Exactly.
And without transition, you can't get anywhere. And so transition sounds exciting, but it's not fun in the midst of the change.
Well, we want to get to that, but you started off, you brought up in church all your life.
Yes.
But religious, but not really in relationship.
No, it had the form, but no, not the power. In the sense that we were very ceremonial, and we thought we were in good with God because we did all the stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember as a boy, I would go to the altar every Sunday and get saved just in case.
There's no real assurance.
I wanted to make sure that I was saved. And my dad one Sunday, because he played the piano for church, said, Ricky, you don't have to go every Sunday. It's making us look bad. So I really had no idea. But then we moved and went to a church where the power of God and very evidently the living God wanted a personal relationship. And I remember that Sunday our entire family went forward and accepted the Lord.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, you received the Lord,
Yeah.
but then there was a call in your life. And I thought this was interesting. Who did God use and how did it happen?
It's amazing. You know, I was going to high school at the time, and I sat across the table at lunch with this young man who I thought, wow, he is really, really lost, really worldly, whatever. And I said, God, if you can save that guy, then I'll really know you've got some power. And so I invited him to church. He literally came to church to check out the girls.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, so he came. God got a hold of him. He gave his heart to the Lord full with tears.
Oh, my.
I fell down next to him and received a call to the ministry.
And that is so cool.
I think God set me up.
I think he did. Yeah, he said, I can take care of him, I can take care of you.
That's right. That's right.
And it probably gave you some kind of desire and realization that God's powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And he's in the business of changing hearts.
Yeah.
Okay, so when that call came, you went to school.
Yeah.
And then after school, you became an associate pastor.
Yeah, I kind of went through the ranks, youth and associate and children's pastor and all those things. And then began pastoring, pioneered a couple of works, and then came here to Port St. Lucie to pastor.
Now, the church you developed here, God used you in a marvelous way, but you hit a bump. Talk
Yeah,
to me
well, we grew very quickly. In fact, we started the church here too. And hit a bump would be a good way to put it. I mean, the church split. We went into a lot of warfare. It was really, really difficult.
No, he's talking about spiritual warfare there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. No cannons or anything.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And our children were quite small, and they were watching all of this and couldn't understand why people were falling apart. And in fact, during that time, my wife and I lost sight of each other. It was too much on her and me, and we separated right here in Port St. Lucie for 3 years. I started selling suits over to department store. I begged God to let me out of this area, and I said, God, please. I even made deals with him. I said, if you let me out, I believe Liz would come with me. Yeah. And he wouldn't let me out, and so I felt it was a pit. It was a place where I died. And when I really came to that point of dying to my preconceived notions, my idealistic ministry thing, I really felt that it was a monumental moment for me, because he brought me out with a whole new understanding and appreciation for the priorities God sees.
Yes. Well, you had a trauma
Yeah.
in your family.
Yeah.
And tell us about what happened to your boy.
Well, about 5 years before all that happened, church is going great. Our son, Ricky, our oldest, was run over by a truck. He was only like, 7 or 8 at the time. And in fact, it crushed all of the insides of this area, and he even had tire tracks from where the truck went over him. And in the hospital, the doctor came out shaking his head, said, I'm sorry, we can just make him comfortable. There's nothing we can do. It's not good.
Oh,
and so he showed me the x-rays, and I said, Doctor, we can't accept that. And thank God for people that came together and prayed. And then he came out again shaking his head and said, he was going like this. I said, Doc, stop shaking your head. And he goes, no, I'm shaking my head because I don't, you saw the x-rays. He says, but there's nothing wrong in there now. He says he's going to be fine. Just a little chip off of his tailbone. And I went in to see him in his room because he was there for a few weeks with swelling and, you know. And as I looked at him, I was thinking very personally, but the Lord said, this is what my church is going to look like. This is something that the church is going to face, but it'll be okay. There's a resurrection. And so I had forgotten about that application until we were going through it years later. And God did a miracle.
And you actually saw you got run over by a truck in your ministry.
Did you get the number of that truck? That's the way I felt.
Get that license.
That's right. And you know, it was a terrible time. Most everybody scattered. I really felt I was in a grave. But we have to die.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we talk about it. I preached about it.
But so, there's something about going through weakness and finding your strength in Him that changes your whole perspective.
Yeah. Transition can't be done with our help.
Yeah, sometimes it can't.
It has to be laid down so that He can do it. And we can fake it and say, God, I'm really moving ahead now. He goes, I know you.
Yeah.
And so I had to die to that.
So tell me, how did you and Liz get back together, family back together, and after that I want to talk to you about what you're doing now.
Well, one thing I said to the Lord, I said, as He began to do this, and I felt a resurrection was happening in my life, He said, I have called you to love that woman, whether she ever comes back to you, as a daughter of mine.
Yes.
And so you're called to love her the rest of your life, whether she ever comes back. And somehow, you know, our wives are they're perceptive. And she picked up on that and just melted. I mean, it was God. She just, because Latinos can get very hot.
And
very cold. And she melted, and she saw something that rekindled the love that we had. And it was quick. And I'm telling you what, for now that's been like 15, 20 years ago. And there's nobody tighter than my wife and I.
You're
and she is
close in that relationship.
She is my best friend.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Yep. Our partners, gifts from God.
Yeah.
Gifts from our source, not our source themselves.
And
takes a lot of pressure off them.
They should complete us because we need it.
Yeah, they do. Well, and now that your heart was back together and your family's back together, God opened up a new ministry for you. We got a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on.
Briefly speaking, I thought the church, we'd go back and on a new way, a new focus, would start building again. But God said, no, I've shifted you. And so He moved us out of the pastor. We gave it over to a pastor now that's doing a great work in Port St. Lucie. And God began to help us to minister to ministers. When nobody would seem to be there for me, I felt maybe we could be there for them.
Yeah.
So that's grown into a global ministry where I speak and go out and share, and so it's about healing the body.
Bringing the body back from after being run over sometimes.
That's right. That's right. Hit by a truck.
And sometimes pastors feel like they've been hit by a truck, and you can have ministry to them. What's the name of your ministry?
Well, it used to be the Body Network. And we changed it because God gave us a name change to Global Embassy Network.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. So you have a network that goes around the world now.
Yeah. Yeah. We're very thankful in other countries. as we're networking, now we become networkers to bring this body, links, ligaments and joints together to welcome the King.
And we all need to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit, because we need to listen, because He's telling us what the head's saying to the body.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a tremendous testimony of how God can work in a life and a ministry, and that He loves us and that He brings us through as we go through our times where we don't understand, and yet we can, in our weakness, find a strength that He can give us to bring us through to the other side, even to a greater measure of what we even thought was going to happen to our life. And this has been that kind of a testimony. And I say it all the time, but I say He's no respecter of persons. He helps all those that will turn to Him and say, Lord, here am I. And if you're here today watching, this is a divine appointment. This is a time that you could just say, that ministered to me. And if it did, you can respond by saying, Lord, please begin that work in me today. I receive Christ. I ask you to come into my life, Jesus. Take over my life. Order my steps. And take this situation and bring it into a miracle of testimony. It'll happen. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
When I first began to walk with the Lord, I could not really trust Him. How He longed for me to understand, oh, that I could. So through the valleys He led me, afraid as I could be, till I felt His loving arms embracing me. How could I ever doubt a God whose hands hold the universe? How could I ever question His ability? There's no place that I can go where He doesn't know the things that trouble me. He's always aware of where I am and just what I need. I've been through enough to know that He'll be enough for me. He's come through so many times that puts my mind at ease for sure. And I'll stake my very life that He's going to take care of me. 'Cause I've been through enough to know that He'll be enough for me. Oh, I believe in Him now. After all these years, He's been faithful. He's so very, very true. Never more can I doubt or question why, 'cause I've seen Him work before, and I know what God can do. know that He'll be enough for me. I've been through so many times that puts my mind at ease for sure. And I'll stake my very life that He's going to take care of you and me. 'Cause I've been through enough to know that He'll be enough for me. 'Cause I've been through enough to know that He'll be enough for me. Yes, I love this. He's all I need. He's all I need. Jesus is all I need. He's all I need. He's all I need. Jesus is all I need.
Monumental change. We're hearing monumental change from these testimonies, but there are moments that make those change. It's the moment. When you're in the moment of God's blessing, in the moment of God's call, that's what begins the change. I have a story. It's found in Exodus, the 4th chapter. It's kind of an exciting story, but it's about a man that's really been deflated. His name is Moses. You remember the story of Moses, how that he was put in a basket and the Pharaoh's daughter picked him out of the Nile and brought him to the Pharaoh and said, this is a baby boy that I want to keep. And he grew up in the palaces of Egypt. He was somebody. He was a trained warrior. He had everything. But his mother was a Hebrew. And because God ordained the steps, you know how God networks things. She raised him and taught him that he was a Hebrew. And really told him that he was going to be probably the deliverer of the children of Israel. You see, the children of Israel were in captivity for hundreds and hundreds of years. They had prospered there in their population, but they'd become slaves. And they needed to be freed. Moses saw this and he realized he was a Hebrew, and so he went into the ministry. He knew he was able, he could do a lot of good things, so what was he going to do? He was going to go into the ministry. So he saw an Egyptian kind of taking advantage of a Hebrew, and he went over and he kind of took advantage of him, and because of his skills, he went into the ministry and had one convert. He killed him. It wouldn't take him too long to get rid of all the Egyptians, would it, one at a time? Well, in his strength, he found out he couldn't do it. He realized that he was in trouble because he had buried the Egyptian. Somebody had dug him up, and when he went to break up a fight between the Hebrews the next day, the Hebrews said, "Are you going to kill us like you did that soldier?" Oh, it scared him, and he began to run. And for 40 years, he went on the backside of the desert, realizing he was not as big as he thought he was. In fact, he thought he was completely finished. It takes a little something for God to get the starch out of us sometimes, because God wants a monumental moment to have a monumental change, because He wants us to realize it's not about us, it's about Him in us. Back there being a shepherd for those 40 years, he learned the humble walk. Till one day he saw a bush that was burning. Now he'd seen many bushes burning because they would just combust out there. It was so hot, but this one just didn't quit burning. The Bible says that it burned and burned, and he looked at it and he turned aside to see why. And out of that bush there came a voice that said, take off your shoes, you're on hallowed ground. Moses, he was astounded. He took off his sandals and he stood there, and God says, Moses, I've heard the cry of my people in Egypt, and I want you to go deliver my people. You talk about a monumental moment. God speaking to you, personally calling you out after emptying of 40 years of yourself and losing your ability to speak. He said, I can't go, I can't even talk, I can't do this. God says, I know, but I can, and I'm going to be with you. But I'm not the deliverer. He says, I know, but I am, and I'm going to be with you. But God, I don't want to do this. I want to stay here. It's my new life. I can't talk. All I have is these sheep, and I'm not a warrior anymore. I don't want to go. He says, you may not, but I do. And I'm going to go with you. Because you see, Moses, when it's all said and done, you'll realize that you didn't really have anything to do with it. I did. Moses said, but God. He said, Moses, this is what you've learned. You got your BN degree out here. You got your B nothing degree. Sometimes we need to have that. Sometimes we need to be emptied out. That you could learn to get your BS degree, be something degree, as you are emptied out of yourself and filled with God. That is a divine, monumental moment when God takes you to, allows you to be emptied out, a death to a vision, and then you surrender and say, well, I can't. And he says, I know. I don't want to. He said, I know. I'm not. He said, I know. But that's what I wanted you to learn. And this is what and this is what changed my life and what will change anyone's life if they're really listening to God. It's not about us. It's about us knowing that I'm not, but He is, and He's with me. I can't, but He can, because He's with me. Sometimes I don't want to, but He does, because He's with me. And when it's all said and done, the most joyful thing in the world is to realize that you were an instrument in God's hands to create a miracle and be a miracle. Because you didn't, but He did. But He did it through you. You talk about exciting life. Oh, I hope you know that life. That life comes through surrender to Jesus Christ. Moses found that life. I hope and pray you find that life. He's no respecter of persons. He's got a miracle for you, and He wants to use you, and He wants to use me. And that monumental moment can change everything if we surrender to His will. It's so good that you tuned in today. Thank you. And I pray that God speaks to you in a very special way. I'll see you next time.
Hi, my name is Scott Crawford, and I'm the executive pastor here at Morningside Church, and we hope you've enjoyed the show today. Monumental Moments is just a small glimpse of the many exciting things that are happening here at Morningside. So if you don't have a home church of your own, I'd like to invite you to come out and join our family for worship here. Here on Morningside's campus, we have Morningside Academy, an accredited private Christian school pre-K through 12th grade. We also have programs and services throughout the week specifically designed for children, youth, men, women, seniors, and so much more. We have small groups for athletics, prayer time, creative writing, music, and Bible study. We even have a group called Celebrate Recovery, which helps people who are struggling to overcome their addictions. Here at Morningside, our mission is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ to our community. And I'd like to invite you to come and be a part of Monumental Moments with us. Our service times and locations are on the screen for you right now, and I encourage you to visit morningsidechurch.com on the web for more information. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time for more Monumental Moments.